Well, I've been asked several times recently about my studio, what supplies I use, what paints, brushes, even what kind of light I use and what kind of easel. So I thought today I would take you into the studio and just show you how I set it up and why I set it up this way, and also about the materials I use and the lighting and so forth. So this is where I come up to the studio every morning. It's in a horse barn here, 6-stalled horse barn, and it's a great place to paint around the property. Over here we have chickens, which you've probably heard in some of the videos. But the barn is nice and roomy, a lot of space, so a lot of storage, which is real helpful when you have a studio, so you don't have a lot of things on top of you all the time when you're trying to paint. And the stalls I use for different things, storing paintings and frames, still life setups. So a lot going on in here. This is kind of my drawing station. In here I'll do value studies, small color studies in gouache or acrylic, just to do the same thing in oils but in a different medium. Kind of helps sometimes. And again, more gouache and acrylic in drawing. Sometimes pastel, but not so much anymore. Then down on this end is where I do the oil painting. There's an office here. And here is the painting end or section of the studio. And I want to set things up so that I have everything within reach while I'm painting. Paint, brushes, paper towels, anything I need, I want at hand, so I'm not having to go searching for it. Painting's hard enough. And if you have things scattered everywhere, it just makes painting harder. So have things, doesn't have to be neat, but has to be organized so that you know where things are. Over here on the left, I have an old kitchen cabinet that I put a tabletop on it with a rug. And here's where I do some framing, sometimes stretching canvases, gessoing boards. So kind of a work table with some drawers in it to hold stuff. Here I have a small little rack for wet painting, small painting, 6x8s up to 9x12. Then on this side, I find it handy to put up 2x4s. I have two 2x4s put together, screwed into the wall. And there I can put wet paintings, paintings I'm working on, I want to kind of be able to look at or see, and little color studies as well. So while I'm painting, I can look at them. It's a nice kind of a second easel while I'm painting, plus a drying rack and shelf for still life objects. Then on the right side of the table, I'm right-handed, so I have a small table that holds all the brushes, and I have them set up in small holders, just something I rigged up to hold the brushes by size. And I don't like to have the paper towels in a roll where I have to kind of rip it off each time, so I tear off a roll at a time and stick it in a box. Paint thinner can. Right now my palette is a handheld palette. Sometimes I have a larger stationary palette, but I like to hold it, step back about 6 feet, mix paint while I'm looking at the canvas from far away. And of course, brushes here, any kind of medium, which I don't use very often. It's liquid for kind of quick drying if I need a painting to dry quickly. And then the paint. I have it separated by large tubes, small tubes, and these are just the colors on my palette, so they aren't random colors. I'm not going to the art store and picking out a bunch of colors that I think look neat, although I do that once in a while. But these are just the colors I use, and so again, it's handy. I don't have to walk somewhere else to get paint. Then my easel is just a standard H easel. I think I got it from Jerry's. I order one every, I don't know, 10 years or so. It's not a big easel. This one's not that expensive. And I'll have a list of supplies, a PDF that you can download after the video. It talks about all the materials I use, including the easel. Now up above here, I have my lighting. I've got 3 lights there. My ceilings are pretty tall, maybe 12 feet high. So I need 3 banks of light. If it was lower, probably just 2. And right now I have the garage door on the barn open. I usually close that because it creates glare. But I use a certain type of fluorescent light bulb that's more resembles north light as opposed to a warm light bulb, which makes all your colors too warm looking on your painting and on your palette. So real important to get the right kind of lighting. Then to help in painting, I have a smart TV, nothing special, just a Walmart TV that I can put in a stick loaded with images that I want to use from. And I also use the iPad as well. And this sometimes doubles as an easel where I can set a small color study against that. So TV screen doubles as an easel as well. All right, now let's move to the supplies I use. And the supplies are not an exhaustive list of paints and brushes and canvas. That's the most expensive. I do look for a really good quality that fits in my budget because I can easily empty out my bank account buying the most expensive brushes and paints and canvas. So look for a good quality depending on what you're doing with your art, a good quality that's permanent, but it doesn't have to be top of the line, most expensive. So paint-wise, start here. I'm using a handheld palette right now. I go back and forth with a handheld palette or a flat table palette. But again, I like to hold this, step back 4 or 6 feet from my canvas, and be able to mix colors from farther away and tip the canvas or the palette to get away from glare. But this is a birch wood I get from Home Depot, just a small board of it, and then use a scroll saw to cut it. And then I apply some kind of wood sealer. I like shellac. I get a spray can of shellac and put about 5, 6 coats on it. And that seals it. It's pretty much like glass. It cleans off really easy. And the colors I use, I have titanium white, cad yellow light, yellow ochre, either cadmium orange or permanent orange, usually a Windsor permanent orange or Utrecht permanent orange, or sometimes cadmium orange. Cad red light, which I don't have out right now, burnt sienna, alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue. This is a dioxazine purple with white added to it. Viridian hue, phthalo blue, and palette scrapings. So the brand of paint I use, for what it's worth, I usually like to buy Utrecht, which is a professional grade paint, or Winsor Newton. And if I'm not going to get one of these two, and the reason I pick these, I've been using them since art school, and it's a very good quality of paint, but not so outrageously expensive. So if I'm not going to buy paint in these 2 brands, I'm going to maybe use a student grade. I make sure I don't buy these 3 colors in a student grade. I always get these in a professional grade. The cad yellow light, alizarin crimson, and the ultramarine blue. And those three colors are the three main pure primary colors, which I do most of my mixing from. All the other colors are to some degree more modifiers. And I will buy student grade once in a while, Winton, for earth colors for sure. This is Winton burnt sienna, or Daler-Rowney. This is Daler-Rowney yellow ochre. And my guess is it's hard to mess up earth colors because they aren't, they're just earth colors. They're not cadmiums. Then there's the synthetic colors, which I think are also easily made. This is Viridian Hue by Daler-Rowney, which means it's not really a viridian. If it says hue, it's not what it says it is. So this is really phthalo green with, I think, just a little bit of white. This violet gray is dioxazine purple with a little white in it. So it gives me a lighter violet, and that's what I have here, that lighter violet. Dioxazine seems to be more of a pure violet. It's not too red, not too blue. It's more in the middle. And then I have the phthalo blue, which is again is a synthetic color. Used to be Prussian blue, was more like phthalo blue. Phthalo is a synthetic color, in the last 100 years or so developed at a very strong permanent color. So stick with a good professional grade. I like Utrecht and Winsor Newton. But if you're going to fill in with the student grade, I think Winton and Daler-Rowney are good. I don't buy the cadmiums in a student grade. And I really don't like ultramarine blue in a student grade or alizarin crimson in a student grade. I like to buy a good quality professional grade paint for the three pure primaries. That doesn't mean you can never do that. I've been on painting trips where I forget something and all I have is a Winsor Newton cad yellow. I mean a Winton cad yellow. Winton is the student grade of Winsor Newton. And it works, but I would rather have a better quality. Now, for brushes, I use synthetic. Well, let's start with the bristle. I use oil bristle brushes and synthetic. And the bristle brushes are either flats or filberts. Once in a while, they're brights. This is a bright right here. And the brand here is either Utrecht professional grade brushes or Gainsborough. And Gainsborough is a Grumbacher. Once in a while I'll use Princeton. And these, the bristle brushes, oil bristle brushes, are a little stiffer. They tend to hold more paint. They're good for scrubbing. And then the synthetics are a synthetic bristle, obviously. A little bit softer, but still fairly stiff. And they can manipulate the paint a little more without disturbing what's underneath. And here again, I do use a lot of brights but they're kind of like short, flat. And then I use the longer filberts or flats. These are filberts, and then an extra long filbert, which is very long, and that allows me to paint thick paint into really thick paint. It works really well. And I generally have a couple of small round brushes that are synthetic for real tiny details, but I tend not to use them very often because once you have a hold of them, it's hard to put them down. You just start picking away. So use as big a brush as possible. And then palette knives, I have the larger one for scraping palette, plus scraping the canvas or the board, and then some smaller ones for mixing on the palette and maybe applying the paint to the canvas. Although I use them more for mixing and then tend to use the brush for applying. But certain instances, applying the palette knife or applying paint with the palette knife comes in. Then the surface I paint on. Right now I'm using mostly board. This is hardboard. Brand name would be Masonite. MDF board. They're just hardboard made of pressed hardwood. And I have on here a coat of medium, and I'll have below the list of supplies I use in PDF. I'll talk about what acrylic medium that is. I put the acrylic medium on the board first, after sanding it a little bit, just to rough it up. Use the acrylic medium to cover it. Then I put 2 to 3 coats of gesso on there. And it has a nice texture to it without being too much, especially for a smaller board. You don't want too much texture on a little board. Same thing here is a little bit bigger. This is, I don't know what brand this is. It's not MDF, but it is just a hard board. And again, seal it first with some kind of acrylic medium and then put 2 or 3 coats of gesso. I will sometimes also glue canvas to the board. And that's going to be another video. I'll talk about doing that. Plus, I'll talk about how to apply the gesso to the board later on also. Once in a while, I use a medium. I'll use liquid. What I really use the medium for is if I have to have the paint dry tomorrow. I'll use medium so the paint dries quicker. Like if I'm traveling and painting and I'm going to be flying home, I can't fly home with a wet painting. So the last couple of days I'll use liquid just to make the paint dry faster. But also in the studio, if it needs to dry quicker for whatever reason, I'll use that. But I typically don't like to use a medium with my paint. It just gives it a different feel that I really don't like. Once in a while on a large canvas, at the end of the painting, I might add a little bit of liquid to make the paints flow a little smoother, but not very often. I will use it for kind of glazes. When I'm done with a painting or done with a passage, I can use a glaze, which I have some videos on how to use glazes in your painting, to just warm up or cool an area or a painting, or make something darker or a little lighter. Now, as far as paint thinner, to thin the paint, right now I'm using Sunnyside, which you can buy at a hardware store. It's not necessarily an art-related product. And usually the paint thinners that aren't art-related, they aren't an art product, they're not good. But this one is. It's pure odorless paint thinner from Sunnyside. And it is real similar to Gamsol. Or Utrecht has a pure odorless called Nude, N-O-O-D. Maybe it's pronounced differently. I've never really heard it pronounced, but it looks like Nude. And it's also no odor paint thinner. You can buy an odorless paint thinner, but it's not good. It'll burn your lungs out. You have to have the pure odorless, which is like Gamsol, the Node or Nude from Utrecht, and the Sunnyside. There's just no toxicity in it. Not that I would close off my studio and sniff it all day, but it's a lot less toxic than your regular paint thinner. Down below, I'll have a PDF where you can download these, as well as the lights. Now, real quick about my lights. In my studio here, right above it, I've got about 12-foot ceilings. I have 3 sets of lights. I mentioned this earlier on, but they are lights that are 5,000 Kelvin. That's a cool temperature to the light, and it is better to paint with a coolish light rather than a warm light. The warmer lights, once you get below 4,000 Kelvin, it starts getting pretty warm. Now you can get up to 6,000, which is really cool, but it is so blue, it turns my paintings a little bit on the bluish side, so I don't use that. So, and these are just regular shop fixtures that I had installed, and 2 bulbs in each fixture. Now, if my room is smaller, the ceiling was shorter, and the room a little more compact, I'd probably just have 2 fixtures, because you don't want too much light either. Too much light will kind of wash out your painting. So this seems to work fine with me. There are some days when it seems a bit overwhelming, the light. So I will just unscrew probably the one in the middle, I think is what I've been doing. And that cuts down on the lighting. But I get these from Home Depot, and they aren't expensive at all, but 5,000 Kelvin is a good grade to use for painting. Now, I've put together a PDF that has all this information in it, and you can find the link to that PDF in the description below.